My aunt told me it's best if you stay away. My daughter deserves one day that's about her and banned me from my cousin's wedding. So I traveled to Spain, married the love of my life, and my wedding went viral. I'm Amara32F, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how everything unfolded over the past several months. It feels like something out of a movie, but I promise you this story is very real. Family drama, bitterness disguised as politeness, and a betrayal that at first left me stunned, but eventually gave me the clarity I didn't know I needed. I want to take my time telling this because it didn't happen all at once. The way my family treated me wasn't a sudden blow. It was a slow leak, a quiet unraveling masked by smiles and justifications. The kind that makes you question whether you're imagining it until one day it's too blatant to ignore. Let me give you some background. I come from a very tight-knit but extremely image-conscious family. We're not rich by any means, but we've always presented ourselves like a little dynasty. My grandparents had 4 children, my mom, her 2 brothers, and my Aunt Denise, the youngest and the loudest. Growing up, family gatherings were mandatory. Photo albums were curated like museum exhibits, and stepping out of line even slightly meant whispered comments and subtle exclusions. I was the only daughter of the eldest sibling. My mom and I always felt a weird kind of spotlight on me. My cousin Celeste, 28F, was Aunt Denise's only daughter. And from as early as I can remember, everything was a competition between us. It was never our doing. In fact, Celeste and I were actually close when we were young. Sleepovers, handmade birthday cards, dressing up as twins, even though we looked nothing alike. But adults love comparing who spoke first, who read better, who wore it better, and Aunt Denise. She made it her personal mission to make sure Celeste always won. At every family gathering, she'd say things like, "Celeste got an A again. She's always been the responsible one," with a glance at me. Or Amar is very creative, which is nice, but Celeste is practical. You need practicality in life. These digs were always said with a tight smile wrapped in a ribbon of maternal concern. As a kid, I didn't always understand the intention, but the tone stuck with me. Things really shifted when we were in college. I studied abroad for a year in Italy, something I had dreamed of since high school. I was so proud, the first person in our family to study internationally. I still remember how I emailed everyone pictures of the countryside, little updates, photos of my campus. Only one person replied, my grandmother. My mom said everyone was too busy to respond. But I found out later from my cousin Levi that Aunt Denise had once said, "She's off trying to make herself look better than the rest of us again." Typical. Still, I tried to keep the peace. I came home for holidays, brought back thoughtful gifts, complimented everyone on their achievements. I learned how to shrink myself just enough to fit into the version of the family they were comfortable with. Celeste and I kept in touch, though more distantly. She got a job in finance while I pursued work in design and later started my own business. Hers was seen as the stable path, mine a hobby until it fizzles out. Never mind that my business eventually took off and paid for the down payment on my apartment. Then came the engagement. Celeste got engaged to a man named Gareth last year. He's the kind of guy who talks like he's in a job interview at all times. Every sentence polished, every smile calculated. I didn't like him much, but I kept it to myself. My mom mentioned the engagement in passing, saying they were planning a huge wedding in the spring. I was happy for her genuinely. Despite everything, I thought maybe this would be a chance to reconnect. I even reached out to Celeste, sent her a handwritten note. Yes, handwritten. Congratulating her and told her if she needed any design help for invitations or decor. I'd love to lend a hand. She didn't reply. I assumed she was busy. Wedding planning is chaotic. So I waited and waited. Weeks went by. Nothing. My mom insisted I was definitely invited and told me not to overthink it. Then one evening in late March, my phone buzzed. A friend of mine from high school tagged me in a Facebook photo with the caption, "The most beautiful bridal shower ever." I clicked the tag. There they were. Celeste, my other cousins, even distant relatives from another state. All gathered in a garden filled with roses and blush-toned tablecloths, champagne glasses, gift baskets, the works. Everyone was there except me. I stared at the photo for longer than I'd like to admit, not because I was sad, but because something finally clicked. This wasn't just forgetfulness. This was intentional. Still, I didn't want to assume, so I asked. I called my mom. Did I miss an invite to the shower? Silence. Then she sighed. Oh, honey, Denise thought it might be better to keep it small. Small. There were 27 people tagged in that photo. I said, Mom, can you just tell me the truth? Another pause. She said it would be less stressful for everyone if you weren't involved. She thinks you bring unnecessary attention to yourself. I laughed. I didn't even mean to. It just came out. Unnecessary attention. Me. I hadn't even spoken to most of the family in months. I had been quietly working, minding my own business, but somehow my existence was disruptive. So I called Anton calmly. Hi, Auntie. I noticed I wasn't at the shower and just wanted to ask, am I invited to the wedding? Her voice didn't waver for even a second. Amara, it's best if you stay away. You always have a way of making things about yourself. And Celeste deserves a day that's just hers. No emotion, no apology, just cold dismissal. I said nothing for a beat. Then I laughed softly and replied, all right, hope it's worth it. I hung up. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not out of anger, but out of peace. I realized I didn't need them. Not anymore. That's when the idea began forming slowly, at first like fog lifting. A quiet, bold thought that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need to attend their celebration because I could create my own. And 6 weeks later, I did. My phone stayed silent for days after that call with Aunt Denise. You'd think there'd be some whisper of concern, some message trying to smooth things over, but nothing came. No follow-up, no one reached out to ask if I was okay or why I hadn't shown up to anything. They had decided I was a problem, and once a person becomes a problem in my family, they quietly erase you and continue on. I didn't tell my mom how deeply that conversation had settled into me. She had a habit of trying to defend Denise always with the same line. She means well, she just doesn't know how to express it. But at what point does intention stop matching? I wasn't a child anymore. I didn't need my feelings to be translated, explained, or justified on someone else's behalf. That week, I deleted myself from the family group chat. There was no drama, just a quiet exit. No one said anything about it, not even a text, just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected started growing. Freedom. I threw myself into work. I met with clients, finalized some branding projects, and kept my mind busy. But Hila noticed. She always did. We were having tea on my balcony when she said it, her eyes narrowing in that way she did when she was reading me like a book. They hurt you again, didn't they? I sighed. It's fine, Amara, she said, her voice firmer. It's not fine. You bend over backwards for these people and they treat you like a piece of scenery. They forgot to move off stage. Enough is enough. I didn't respond right away. I was used to people telling me to let things go, to take the high road, to be the bigger person. But Hila wasn't saying that. She was saying the opposite, and it stunned me into silence. Then she leaned back and smiled. You need an escape. Barcelona, come with me. I'm going for the wedding shoot next month. We can stay a week. Just us. No expectations, no family, no Denise. I hesitated, but then something strange happened. I said yes. Just like that, I hadn't said yes to anything in a long time that wasn't out of obligation. I had no idea that one decision would change everything. The flight to Barcelona was the first time I'd felt real excitement in months. I watched the clouds outside the window, headphones and fingers tapping against the armrest. The air felt different the second we landed. And not just literally, it was like I'd stepped into a version of life where I was allowed to take up space. Hila's wedding shoot was scheduled for the weekend, so we had 2 days to explore. On the first evening, we ended up at a little cafe on a side street near the Gothic Quarter. That's where I met Matteo. He was not what I expected, kind without being overbearing, sharp-witted but soft-spoken, and with this calm energy that settled around him like warm light. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't trying to impress. He just listened. He asked questions. And when I told him why I'd flown across the ocean with my best friend on a whim, he didn't pity me. He just nodded and said, "Sounds like you needed to breathe." That first night we just talked and I laughed more than I had in months. The next few days passed like something out of a dream. Matteo took us to spots tourists never find. Rooftops with hidden gardens, tiny bookshops tucked behind courtyards, a bakery that made the best pistachios I've ever tasted. He knew everyone, not in a showy way, but because he actually paid attention to people. I watched him joke with the elderly shopkeeper, help a little boy who dropped his soccer ball in the street speak gently to a nervous street performer trying out a new song. He was real, and I had spent so long surrounded by people who were only interested in appearances that it felt unreal. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was honest, and I needed that more than anything. Isla was the one who nudged the next chapter forward. We were sitting at breakfast on the third morning, sunlight pouring across the table when she said completely casually, "You know, I was thinking you never had your moment. You always made room for everyone else's celebrations. You planned birthdays, hosted baby showers, even helped decorate for Celeste's graduation dinner. Remember that? The one you weren't even thanked for?" I nodded. "Yeah, I remember." She smiled. "What if we made our own?" I raised an eyebrow. Our own what? Isla leaned forward. I sparkling. Our own celebration. A day for you. Not to get revenge, not to prove anything. Just to claim your joy. Something no one can take credit for or twist. Something that's about you and only you. I laughed, but not because I thought it was ridiculous. I laughed because for the first time I actually wanted it. I looked at Matteo, who was seated quietly beside us sipping his espresso. He smiled at me. I know a place, he said. The venue was tucked away on a hillside overlooking the sea, a former artist's retreat now used for small events and weddings. It wasn't huge, it wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. Covered in climbing ivy with hand-carved wooden doors and a terrace that looked out over the ocean like it had been waiting just for us. That's when the idea became something real. Isla took charge. Of course she did. She coordinated with the venue, spoke to local vendors, and called in a few favors from her photography friends. I didn't tell anyone. Not a soul, not even my mom. Not because I wanted to be secretive, but because I didn't want anyone to ruin it. It was just us, a tiny group of people who knew me, valued me, and wanted to see me happy. And somewhere along the way, Matteo and I fell in love. It wasn't planned, nothing was. But something about being in that space surrounded by laughter and light let everything align. I looked at him one night as the sun set across the water, and I realized I didn't want to leave him behind. And to my shock, he felt the same. So Isla said the words that started it all. If you two want to get married here, I'll make it happen. We did. It was quiet, it was sincere, and it was exactly what I needed. Now here's the part where everything changed. We didn't post about it right away. Isla took her time editing the photos, and I didn't mention it online. I was just happy quietly until Celeste's wedding day. That morning, Isla tagged me in a photo. One photo. It was a picture of Matteo and me standing beneath an arch of wild flowers. Sunlight behind us, both of us laughing. Not posed, not forced, just joy. She captioned it. The most beautiful wedding I've ever had the honor of shooting. Congratulations, Amara and Matteo. You two are magic. I didn't think much of it, but apparently the rest of the internet did. The photo got picked up by a travel blog Isla had worked with before, then reshared by a wedding trends account. The post started getting traction, thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. Suddenly, people were tagging me, messaging me, asking where the venue was, who designed my dress. If we had a video, that would have been fine, except it happened to go viral the exact same day Celeste was walking down the aisle. And some of our mutual acquaintances started talking. One of them even commented publicly. Wait, didn't her family just throw a huge wedding and not invite her? Yikes. And that's when the messages started pouring in. But it wasn't from Celeste. It was from Aunt Denise. Her message was short. What is this? You didn't tell anyone you were getting married. How dare you try to upstage your cousin? This was her day. No congratulations, no curiosity, just fury. She wasn't mad. I got married. She was mad I didn't ask permission. I didn't respond to Aunt Denise's message. Not right away. For the first time in my life, I let her sit in silence. I reread her words more times than I care to admit. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything I had always quietly suspected. Her first response to my wedding wasn't joy or curiosity or even mild surprise. It was outrage. Not because she missed the moment, but because she wasn't in control of it. I could almost hear her voice in my head. That clip tone she always used when she felt the world was spinning out of her hands. How dare you do something without consulting the family, without me? And that right there was the crack in the foundation I'd been waiting for. A few hours after her message, my cousin Levi sent me a photo. It was taken at Celeste's wedding reception. The lighting was dim, the chandeliers blurred in the background, and right at the center was Aunt Denise slumped over on a chair, hand on her chest, surrounded by concerned guests. Her face pale, eyes wide. The caption, "Your wedding photos were showing up on every phone at the table." I think Aunt Denise fainted. I didn't reply to that either, but I smiled. Now let me be clear. I didn't plan the timing of the post. Isla had tagged me early that morning because she thought the pictures were ready and beautiful and worth sharing. She didn't even know Celeste's exact wedding date, and neither did I because I wasn't invited. But the universe has a sense of humor, and apparently so does karma. Within 24 hours, my inbox was flooded. Some messages were kind friends, old classmates, acquaintances from college saying how beautiful the wedding looked, how happy I seemed, but others less generous. Some of my own family members, people who hadn't spoken to me in months or even years, suddenly remembered my number. My Aunt Lucia Denise's older sister sent me a voice message that I'll never forget. She started with a cold sigh, then said, "You've caused quite a stir. Was that really necessary, Amara, to post something like that today, of all days? Do you know how hard Celeste worked for this wedding? She was in tears when she saw what you did, what I did. They acted like I had stolen her bouquet mid-ceremony or marched down the aisle in a white dress before her." I still didn't respond, but Isla, ever the perceptive soul, pulled up her chair next to mine later that night and said, "They're spiraling, aren't they?" I nodded more than I expected. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "You know, if they think that one photo ruined their event, they haven't seen anything yet." That got my attention. "Lila," I said slowly. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head and smiled. "Do you remember that branding project we did last year for that European wedding magazine, the one with the outdoor features section?" I nodded. "Well," she said, her smile growing, "they've been asking me for another exclusive and they want your wedding." I blinked. "They want to feature it." She nodded, and I already said yes. At first I hesitated. I didn't want this to become a tit for tat, but Isla stopped me. "You didn't plan to upstage anyone. You didn't manipulate or sabotage their wedding, but you did something beautiful, something real. Why should you hide it just because they think they own joy in the family?" She was right. I had spent too long making myself smaller to make room for others. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reclamation. But that's when the shift really started. The article dropped a week later, a full spread. 12 glossy pages of sun-drenched moments. Interviews with Isla and me, quotes about love found unexpectedly, and a short feature on my design work. It was picked up by 2 more digital platforms within 3 days. Suddenly, emails started coming in from small venues, photographers, and clients. My website traffic doubled. My social media following tripled. But it wasn't just about business. For once, people were seeing me. Not the version Aunt Denise always painted, not the caricature of the attention seeker, not the misunderstood relative who needed to be left out for peace. No, this was my story, and my family hated it. 3 days after the article dropped, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked tired, and something about the way she clutched her purse made me brace myself. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, of course. She sat down at the edge of my couch like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Then she said it. "Celeste is devastated. She thinks you've ruined her memory of the wedding." I stayed quiet. "She's convinced people will remember your wedding more than hers." Still, I said nothing. My mom looked at me, then really looked at me, and for the first time, I think she realized something was different. Something had shifted. She said she saw guests on their phones looking at your photo. Right after the cake, Denise was furious. "They say you did this despite them." I met her gaze. Calm, clear. "I got married 6 weeks ago, Mom. I didn't post it. I didn't tell anyone. I had my own life moment. They were the ones who made it a competition." She didn't respond. I don't think she had a counter-argument, not a real one. Then she said something soft, almost pleading. "Can you just take the article down? Maybe ask them to remove it." I stared at her. She wasn't asking me to protect my cousin. She was asking me to dim myself again for their comfort. I stood up. "No, Mom. I won't. I didn't ask them to leave me out of the wedding. I didn't create this rift, but I also won't keep apologizing for being visible." She looked like she might argue, but then she just nodded slowly and left. That might have been the end of it, but Aunt Denise wasn't done. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, a physical letter on monogram stationer, naturally. The letter was 4 pages long, filled with flowery language, but every sentence dripped with passive aggression. She called my wedding a sideshow, said I had weaponized timing, and accused me of flaunting happiness to provoke pain. But the line that stood out, the one that still sits in my drawer, read, "You've embarrassed this family more than you realize. You've damaged Celeste's future by overshadowing her start. Don't expect forgiveness." Forgiveness. She spoke of forgiveness like it was hers to give. That letter didn't break me. It focused me. I was done asking for a seat at their table, so I built my own. And then I sent out invitations. I planned an event, not a wedding, but a private gathering, an exhibition, a design showcase, a celebration of my work and my life, hosted in collaboration with the same publication that featured my wedding. There would be media coverage, editors, clients, friends, no family, at least not officially. The event was held on a crisp autumn afternoon just outside the city at a restored estate known for hosting curated art and design showcases. It had ivy-covered columns, arched glass doors, and open-air courtyards lined with soft white lights. Isla helped me coordinate the entire thing. And Mateo, quiet and steady as ever, stood by me through each decision, never pressuring, never overstepping, simply reminding me with his presence that I didn't owe anyone's silence anymore. I named the event Unfolded a Visual Memoir. The premise was simple. A curated gallery of my design journey projects installations, photographs, typography, brand builds. But layered throughout were quiet nods to my personal life, framed notes from old clients, photos from my wedding that hadn't been shared publicly before a video installation that opened with a quote, "When your light makes others uncomfortable, shine anyway." I knew without a doubt that someone in the family would come. Even though no invitations were sent their way, curiosity was a trait Aunt Denise and Celeste couldn't suppress, especially when their control was slipping. Sure enough, they did. They arrived 30 minutes into the event. I didn't see them right away, but Isla did. She walked over, leaned in, and whispered, "They're here." I turned and spotted them at the back corner of the gallery room. Aunt Denise's arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. Celeste beside her, looking around with a confused sort of envy in her eyes, as if trying to figure out how something so polished, so professional, so beautiful could have happened without her. They didn't approach me right away. Instead, they hovered. I watched as they read the panels, stood in front of the wedding photos, especially the one of Mateo and me, surrounded by friends, holding hands and laughing under a canopy of white orchids. It wasn't long before the whispers started. A few people who recognized them from past family events were surprised. A few asked questions. Weren't they the ones who didn't invite her to that wedding? Why would they come here after everything? Do they think this is about them? Eventually, Aunt Denise walked up to me. Not alone, of course. Celeste followed 2 steps behind, her expression unreadable. Denise was dressed like she always was, perfectly coordinated, not a hair out of place. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "This is quite the event," she said, voice cool. "Very ambitious." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She gestured around vaguely. So many photos, so much attention. There it was, the accusation tucked inside a compliment. Celeste spoke next, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know you were planning something like this." "Of course not," I said calmly. "I don't announce things to people who erase me." The words landed heavier than I expected. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Aunt Denise stiffened. She stepped closer. "You didn't need to go this far just to make a point, Amara." I looked at her for a long moment. "You think this is about you?" She didn't answer. "This is the first time I've done something without thinking about how you'd twist it, without worrying who you'd talk to after. I didn't plan this to get back at you. I planned it because I finally stopped letting you define what I'm allowed to celebrate." Celeste frowned. "But the wedding photos on the day of my wedding, that wasn't an accident." I turned fully to her then. "You planned a wedding and intentionally left me out. Not just quietly, but cruelly. You paraded photos in front of me, excluded me from family conversations, and said nothing when your mother called me an embarrassment. I got married in peace. I celebrated in silence. You're the ones who turned it into a competition when you made your entire identity about being seen while erasing me." Silence. Guests nearby had quieted. They weren't trying to listen, but the energy had shifted. Aunt Denise straightened, trying to salvage the moment. "You could have handled this differently." Privately, I shook my head. "That's what you're afraid of, isn't it? That for once something wasn't hidden. That I didn't quietly accept my place behind you. That the world saw something you couldn't control." I took a step closer, my voice calm, even, but resolute. "I don't want your approval. I don't need your forgiveness. I just want you to understand that I see you now for who you are, for what you've always been, and you don't get to shrink me anymore." She flinched, subtle but noticeable. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Celeste followed. No dramatic exit, just silence, a door closing behind them, and that was the last time I saw either of them. In the weeks that followed, the event was featured in 2 design publications. I received speaking offers, client requests, and 1 inquiry from a university department about guest lecturing. Mateo and I moved into a new apartment overlooking the city. Something modest, something ours. My mom, to her credit, eventually sent a quiet message. "I'm proud of you. I wish I had stood up for you sooner." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. As for Aunt Denise and Celeste, they went quiet. I've heard from distant relatives that Denise was furious that no one paid attention to her at family gatherings after the article and showcase, that some cousins had started questioning the way she treated people, especially me, that Celeste, embarrassed by the comparison between our weddings, had started telling people she'd chosen a more understated ceremony on purpose. I don't bother correcting them. They've built their legacy on control and curated stories, and for a long time I played along, but not anymore. I didn't just move on, I moved forward. And the best part, I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to sabotage. I just lived fully truthfully and without permission. And that was the one thing they never saw coming. Now I'm happy. Really deeply happy. Not because I got revenge, though. Yes, it was sweet, but because I finally let go of the illusion that their approval was ever worth chasing. They tried to erase me, but I wrote myself back in.